Welcome back, Trust Me fam. We are so happy to be back with you today. Today, since we launched off the beginning of season two with two words that we're walking into 2024 with, and if you haven't had a chance to listen, go back and listen to why we chose these words, but we are focusing on discipline and humility. Uh, Yanni's really focusing on discipline. I'm focusing on humility, but as a collective for Trust Me, we're really going to try to pull that out for our community a little bit. So when we thought about appropriate topics coming up, one of the things we wanted to really look at was the inner is mindful mothering. We think about mindful mothering not just in the sense of being, but also through the lens of tactic. And that's sort of what we're going to get into today. So, Miss Kiana, I will just shoot it right to you, which I know you love, aka don't love.
Right, right.
When we talk about mindful mothering, like what's the very first thing that rises to the top for you?
Wow. I mean, a lot of things come to mind. But one of the things that stands out is communication. And when it comes to me, it's just like mindful communication, like choosing your words, realizing what you say, understanding that words have true and real power. It happened to me today, right? Very easily. I was just like telling Beth right before we started recording. I'm getting ready to record, and somehow I put my headphones down in the wrong way, and it was like a domino effect, and the coffee and the water, everything spilled over, and coffee got everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so simple. Things like that happen all the time. You guys know the saying, don't cry over spilled milk. Well, in this case, don't cry over spilled coffee. But what came out of my mouth was a reflection for a second of how I felt, just like flustered, right? So what came out of my mouth was like, "Oh my gosh, I fucking hate this." And
And then
what
you
I was
immediately checked yourself. Or
what I
you,
what I was pertaining to was like, I hate life. I hate right now, like, and
yeah.
it was a like, and when I said it, I instantly was like, "What are you saying?
Mm-hmm.
What are like think about what you just said."
So
Was
detrimental.
so detrimental? Was it that serious? Was what happened, it's spilled milk, it's spilled coffee. You clean it up. It's fine. There are worse things happening in the world,
Yeah.
and you're crying over spilled coffee, right? So even with those words coming out, and a lot of times, even when we're parenting, the words that says, I can't, or, even sometimes with my kids, I try to, and I think this is just like an instinct of being a parent, that you try to save your child from hurt, from them endangering themselves, right? And a lot of times when your kids are out there playing and they're having a good time and they want to do something that's maybe a little scary for you, like
Mhm.
maybe they're going and they're balancing themselves and you're like, hey, get down from there, don't do that, right? And what's happening is we're instilling fear into our kids to not do that. But instead, we could choose our words and be more conscious of the things we say. We say, hey, if you're going to do that, be mindful of your feet.
Yep.
Be mindful of how you put your hands down. Be mindful that there's a hill or a jump or a whatever in front of you. So that hits so hard
Or
for me
also
because,
sometimes say nothing
or say nothing and let it
because
happen.
it's really your fear, and if
You're
you could
projecting
check
that.
in with yourself, you might even say like what's a natural consequence? If it's not
Right.
like something real wild or real crazy like walking into traffic,
Right.
sometimes natural consequences are okay.
Are okay. And just like I had, like I said, like a second ago, I had to check myself. Like, you don't hate life. You don't hate this. You don't hate where you're at in life and where you are right now. But it came out like almost like so freely that this is something that I do need to work on myself with, is communicating and choosing the words more careful. And
Yeah.
and like I said, that just happened with me, but even pertaining with mothering and kids, just choose your words carefully. Instead of saying you can't, choose other lingo
Yeah.
that will be more positive.
I will tell you, in the spirit of humility, I had a moment this week too, and I actually wasn't going to bring this up, but since you're being vulnerable, I'll be vulnerable too, where I was trying to do too much at once. It was an early day this week and kind of set the context. I've had some kids home sick from school. So they're just all a little bit grumpy, right? So I'm trying to, you know, mother because they're
Right.
home. I'm also trying to work at the same time because things need to get done. And so Nicholas and I started a project. And then something came up with work. So I had to really quickly switch my gears to like this really fire that was happening at work. And so he keeps going on the project, which was a painting project. And then Mike comes in and I'm flustered. I have a lot of anxiety because it's a really big project at work. And basically he was like, "What are you doing letting him paint in this brand new room that I just painted with no drop cloth down?" And I like immediately froze. And I like went out, I like got the painting project into the garage. Meanwhile, I'm still working, right? I'm trying to do too much. And then he doubles down and he says something along the lines of like, "I can't believe you would let him do that." And now my soul is being crushed. Like in my heart, I'm like, I'm not a good mom. I'm not a good person. And in front of my kids, I was like, shut up. And we both knew that that was a no-no. Like we really talked to our kids about how to speak to one another. And we've done a lot of work around not saying shut up to each other.
Mm.
And then it comes out of my mouth, right? And so it's like, obviously when everything died down and fizzled out, like we kind of met as a family and, you know, I apologized to him. I apologized to him in front of the kids. But
Which
when
is
I
important.
stepped back and when he stepped back, right, because he played a part in that too. Like he was poking the bear. The bear was like in flight mode and he kept doubling down and then I just lost it. So it was a poor moment of emotional reactivity. But when I stepped back, what I actually needed to be mindful of in that moment was finding him and saying, "Hey, I need you to come up here and take over this project that you had no idea was even happening, that you really probably wouldn't start right now, but I need you to take it over so I can deal with this thing at work instead of trying to do three things at once."
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all about communication. Um, you know, having those conversations with yourself and saying like, "Hey, be mindful. The words that you are letting come out have true power."
Yeah.
And understanding that. I love the fact that you went back and you apologized because,
Yeah.
apologizing is huge and it's major and it's hard for a lot of people to do so. So the fact that you did that, not only, to Mike to show like, "Hey, I didn't mean to speak to you that way," but the fact that you did it in front of your children is to show them that like, "Hey, we all get like this.
Yeah.
Things come out, you say things, we're human."
And that's not like a once in a while thing. Like that happens pretty frequently because I mess up pretty frequently.
Oh, for sure. I do too. We all do,
Yeah.
but being able to say, "Hey, I'm sorry for my actions. I realized where I was at and I need to make that shift of where I want to be. And in order to do that, I need to face the things that came out of my mouth."
Yeah. And the other thing too, and I'll link this is, the juggling act of, being a mom, holding down a career. There are times that you're going to have to prioritize the career over the kids, right? Was a perfect example. And I don't want people to feel bad about that. Like there are definitely going to be times that work is going to take over your family before your family. It's not most of the time, but there are times and that's realistic. But what I will say is work again is a rubber ball. If you drop it, it will bounce. Family is a glass ball. If you drop it, it will shatter. So what was really important from a mindful perspective for me was like carving out the time to say like this wasn't cool what I did and how I reacted. And just so you know, we are still firm in the way that you talk to your siblings. Like you can't say those words even though you just saw me do that to dad.
Yeah.
Was
I
it
love that.
embarrassing? Yes. As soon as it left my mouth, I was like, you done just effed up.
I love that.
In the past, I would have probably doubled down and said to Mike, you made me do this, right? You made me say that because you were poking the bear. But we talk so often about what we do, our behaviors are our responsibilities. So, no, it
100%.
wasn't cool what he was doing, but he didn't make me say those things.
No, because no one can make you say those things or feel a certain way. You have complete control over that.
Real life, real life,
This is real. This is what happens every day.
every day.
The the other
Seriously, though.
biggest thing, we talk about this a lot in everything, right? So this is not just with mindful mothering. This is in general. Um, Build a support system.
Yeah,
You need it. You need to share the stories. You need it. You need to get things off your chest. You need to have a better understanding. And to bring it back to mothering, it's like you need that support from other parents. And I know I feel so much better when I'm going through whatever and I can pick up a phone and call a friend and say, hey, this is what I'm going through.
yeah,
What should I do? Because a lot of times when we're in these situations, we feel like this is the only, I'm the only person that this kind of stuff happens to.
yeah,
No one else can share this experience. Why me? And then you start to, communicate, what you're going through and you realize that, oh my God, there are people like me. I mean, hence why we started this podcast, right?
yeah.
We're going at life
Mhm.
alone and then we're like, wait, I'm talking to Beth and she's like, oh girl, I know what you're talking about. I feel you, and my
Right.
feelings felt validated. So the same thing happens, when you do have those moments where you're like, hey, like I just need to talk this one through.
And in the spirit of strengthening, ourselves, I have seen a trend on Instagram mostly around just glorifying like being a tired hot mess mom. And I don't think that that's what we mean
No,
because I'm not like I don't want anybody staying in that state
heck no.
for so long because what that means is that you're neglecting yourself.
Yeah.
If I could really track back that one moment that I just shared like a few weeks back, right? Being mindful, what haven't I been doing? I haven't been waking up at 6 a.m. I haven't been doing my consistent movement that I set for myself, right? Like I've gotten in not a long rut, but like a couple weeks, and that will happen because the kids are sick and schedules are changing and all of that. But if I had had some discipline around that, probably I could have diffused my emotional reaction a bit more.
Yeah.
Probably I could have asked Mike, help me out for just a second. Got a couple things, fire at work, got to take care of it. Help me out.
Yeah. Or even like, hey, is this the right project to start right now during this time?
Bingo. And that, that's what he said. Because I was trying to do too many things. Like when he stepped back, he was like, why would you even start this right now? You're working, you have a kid home. And, for me, it was like schools were closed because we had a really bad storm. And it was something like my ADHD impulsivity. That was a moment of that where it's like, and he has ADHD, Nicholas. So when we are impulsive together, it's not a good mix because it wasn't a good project to start right now. Like I could have just got him into something else that didn't involve like paint and drop cloths and all these things. So that's such a good point.
Yeah. And I think that like I was talking to you about earlier, is like um having rituals,
Hmm.
having those routines. Um Kids do a lot better with that. I know I do better with that. And I get it, guys. Like there's been times where you have to think of things on the fly, or it didn't work out how you thought it was going to work out.
Yeah.
Or, those things happen more times than not. So we have to be on our toes, and sometimes the plan gets switched, right? but to go about life that way is
Well, it was your
chaotic.
original point.
Yeah.
There was no real plan or structure. I mean, we didn't even know where the pain was that we needed. So as I'm like trying to take care of something, he's out looking for paint, making a mess in the garage, and you're so right about that. I mean, the better thing probably would, and again, in theory, because this is not something that I do, but just having a list captured somewhere of the projects and when we intend to do them, like putting a plan in place around them.
Yep. I mean, how many times have you I mean, I've done it. I've done it where I'm like, I wake up and I don't have a plan, right? And I'm like, "You know what? Today's the day that I'm doing all the deep cleaning. I'm getting rid of this, I'm doing that, I'm doing X, Y, and Z." And I start it in like 45 minutes and I'm like, "What am I
You're
doing?"
tuckered out, yeah.
I'm already the house is a mess. There's stuff everywhere. And I'm in this state like, why did I even start
And
this?
where's my lifeline? Because I'm not
Where's
getting
my
out of this
lifeline? The
today.
kids will be home in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Why did I start this? This was not the right time. This was, this is going to take way more than just myself.
You probably
This
have
is
some major event that night.
I have something going on that night. The kids have practice right after school. I have 2 hours to either finish through with this project, which is
Yeah,
not going to happen, or I'm going to have had wasted 2 hours already
yeah.
and put all the stuff back to
And then
where it
you're
originally was.
paralyzed. You're paralyzed in that moment of, "What do I do now?"
Yeah, and you're defeated because you felt like you did so much, but you did nothing.
Yeah.
So like it happens to me more times than not. And sometimes I have to like sit and say, "Hey, Key, like, is this the right thing to do right now? I know that's impulsive. I know that right now you're like, this is a great time. I have the energy right now. I have the mindset right now. But is it the right time?"
Well, just you are big with lists.
I am.
And one thing that I've been doing just with tasks is, what do I have to do versus what do I want to do? And then the have to do is like the things like laundry, grocery shopping, these types of things. Unload the dishwasher. I don't know why that throws me over the edge every time, but
It
like I'll
does.
do one task at a time, right? And it's like I'll give myself a time span. So it's usually the weekend because that's when we spend a lot of our times doing these big duties. And so if I have space on the want to do, that's when I'll enter some of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like that's just that's what it is. Like even with my list, like I've I've not always been a list person. But
Yeah.
I've found out that that is what works for me. That's how I'm more productive. That's how I get things done. If it is not on my list and it is not on my calendar, that means it is not getting done, which hopefully that means that it's not a priority right now, you
Yeah.
know? And like even right now, like after the new year, I got like a little anxiety at like right after Christmas. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's a new year. It's a whole start of a whole new thing, right? A whole new plethora of things I have to sign the kids up, get ready for, do this, do that. Like, if you plan on taking any kind of summer trips, like this is the time to do that now, to get
Yeah.
that together if you haven't already. If your kids are going to summer camp, this is the time to sign them
Yep.
up.
Yep.
Indy is starting,
PSA to
school.
our busy mamas out there. This is the
Right.
time not
This
to
is the
stress
time.
anybody
Not
out,
to
but
stress anyone out. But if you are, I have a toddler that will be starting school in the fall. Like this is the time to start doing that. So I knew that right after the holiday, I was like, oh my God, I need to buckle up because these are the things. So I had to make lists because camps and things like that, they're competitive. If you
yeah,
didn't get in the same hour that the open enrollment started, most likely it's not happening, and it's
yeah,
insane, and it should not be that way, but that is how it is. And I know that's how it is in Maine, and I know that's how it is in Pennsylvania, and I'm
yeah.
sure every state and every town, that's how it is. It's a very competitive thing. And so
Which I
just
will add just a layer to that. It is like that here.
yeah.
And I have had to really adjust my expectations to be like, okay, you're either going to be ramped up and you're going to sit by the internet and figure this out, or you're going to be okay if you don't get into first choice camps, and you're
Right.
going to have to be okay getting into second choice camps.
Yeah.
Because honestly, how much how many times have you put your kids in second choice camps and they came home and they were like, I really wish I was in that first choice camp. They don't
Never.
know
Never. And
how
a lot of
you
times it's
build
for
it up for them.
ourselves. Like at this point, I'm like, no, like they're going to camp. Like, what's available? What do you got open? Like, I
Yeah,
just like
because
I
I will
try
say
not.
most cases I've missed it,
Yeah,
and I might miss it. I might be missing it in this moment.
right, right. And I think like I like these are things that you have to think about. Like, what is worth stressing yourself out about?
But the point is, your emotions are still valid. You're still feeling that anxiousness
Right,
around it, but
right.
you need to be able to cultivate a sense of patience that combats that.
And even when you're creating on your list, like I know this is the things I do that like, hey,
Well, I
if
don't
they
create a list,
yeah,
so
Beth doesn't create a list. Hence why she's starting to do a painting project. And mind you, I was just at Beth's house for over New Year's, and they are adding it. They're doing a lot with their house, and it's beautiful already, and it's going to be even more gorgeous. And I'm with Mike. I don't know why you started that
I
project in
don't
your
know
new painted
either.
room, but like that's because
I'm trying to like feel good about myself.
she
Like
didn't have a list, y'all.
I didn't have a list. I
She didn't
don't
have a
have a
list.
list. I
But
don't have a list.
I am I have lists, and even like sometimes depending on what it is, I have a plan B. Like, hey, I want to sign them up for X, Y, and Z. If that doesn't work, then I need to sign them up for you know whatever. So like that's how my mind works, and it makes me
Yeah.
feel better that way, that when I explore all options and know that okay, if I can't do this, I'm going to do this. Because if I don't, I feel defeated, and I feel like, oh my gosh, like there's no, what am I going to do, summer's going to be ruined, blah, blah, and I go on this spiral. So I know that if I take the time to kind of plan it out as much as I can within reason, right, I'm not too crazy with it, that it just adds a better flow to things. And I'm not that parent that gets stressed out over, my kids didn't get to go to blase blah camp, or they didn't get to do
Juilliard.
like, yeah, yeah, like I'm not like that whatsoever. And I would like to think that my kids live a very
I feel like
great
you need to
life.
create a blase block camp.
A blase blah camp, yeah, because like
What
that's
would
what it
it
feels like. It's
what
like
would it
blase blah.
entail?
Yeah, it's like what does that camp really offer? Nothing. Blase blah. Like,
But give me your money
but give
and
me
a
ten
lot of it.
give me $10,000 a week for this camp that doesn't even give them lunch. Um, I'm not packing lunches at all in 2024
Blase
summer.
block camp? No, you're figuring it out.
Yeah, Blase Blah camp. They
It
probably
actually
literally.
doesn't even exist. The kids are still going to be home with you.
They're probably better off being home with me than going to
It's
Blase Blah
like, we're
camp.
going to teach you how to do a summer camp this year.
Blase Blah camp is just like whoever shows up shows up. Like sometimes there's a counselor there, sometimes there's not.
It's like GPS takes you to like a cement parking lot. Oh, we're getting into red. But
Jesus.
anyway, I will tell you, I do learn a lot from you with your list because at least you know what's ahead of you. And
Yeah.
it's like there are going to be some hard things on that list, but if you get through them and you tackle them and that thing only, it's off your list. It's off, you're no longer pressured around it.
Well, remember when we talked about, I think it was like two episodes, I think it was the last episode of 2023, I do believe. Don't quote me on this. Um, but we were talking about the story of like the cows and the buffaloes,
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right. So like this is one of those stories. This is where where it kind of pertains to. It's the fact that like me personally, when I do create my list, the harder tasks are usually up top.
Yeah.
Because in my head, I'm like, bring on that challenge. Bring on this, like I want to tackle those things, because if I don't, and I keep like either acting like they're not going to happen and pushing them to the side and procrastinating, or keep them at the bottom of the list, what happens is that one thing that we all need more of, that we can never have more of, that thing called time,
Hmm.
comes. And the longer you wait, the harder it gets. The
Yeah.
longer you wait, the more anxious you get. The longer you wait, the less time you have,
And
which
yeah,
is
and then you're
already going to build
tackling the
anxiety.
project and the
Yeah,
emotions.
it's true. So like in my head, I'm like, if I can tackle these more challenging things first and
Yeah.
knock them out, everything that follows that seems easier. Seems like, oh,
Yeah.
that's a walk in the park. I can do that in 2 seconds. You know what I mean? But if you don't, and you save those harder tasks for the end, you're always anticipating this big thing that's happening. And most likely what you're going to do is kind of suppress that and kind of like keep it at the bottom, and like keep filling other things in, in the in its
Yeah.
place, and it never gets done.
Um, Simple too is I think best, and consistency. So we talk a lot about discipline. When we are set up for success, it's not as wild, right? So I'm thinking about, my evening now. I've kind of added 20 minutes in the I always make my coffee the night before. So that's a habit. So what I've done now is added a habit to a habit. So as I'm making my coffee, I also go around the house and I get everyone's shoes and I put them right by the breakfast table. And that way, in the morning, I don't have to crazily go and look for shoes and then, can't you can only find one where and you're like going through mental gymnastics like where did they go when they got home from school yesterday, blah blah blah. So I added a habit to a habit, and that
Hmm.
has been really helpful in regards to getting us out of the door less frazzled.
Love that.
But also just like my own support in the morning where it's like I already know that it's done. I already know where the shoes are. So as I'm waking up and waking the kids up, I no longer have to think, "Oh my god, I got to hurry them up because I don't know where their shoes are." Right? They don't know time. They don't know that they only have 50 minutes to eat. Mom has to find shoes, pack book bags, blah blah blah, get out of the door. So it sets us all up in a way.
Yeah. You're actually taking out stressors, right? And I think that's the other thing is planning, like understanding and knowing the things that, are going to stress you out. And once you do that, you can say, okay, now I'm going to eliminate those things. Sure, there'll be other things that pop up, right? But when you take affirmative action and you start to eliminate the things that you already know is going to cause frustration and, anxieties in the mornings, like eliminate those things. Same thing. Like I told my kids, I was like, hey, pick out your clothes at night. Pick out your clothes at night,
That's key.
bring them down, get them together. That way, that's one less thing we have to think about. Because I know how my kids are. I try to pick out their clothes and like, I don't want to wear that. I don't want to do that. And then I get stressed because in my head, I do have a concept of time. And I'm like, hey, we're wasting time doing this. So taking those stressors out just so you can have an easy flow, an
Yeah.
easier flow. Because sometimes it's never easy, but
You
easier.
kind of kicked us off with this. Something I wanted to reinforce is just the non-judgmental observation of your behaviors. So, one of my behaviors that I've been observing is when I do get frazzled or feel in a place where I don't know the next step, I always end up sitting down and wanting to scroll my phone. It's like a way to just like diffuse, but it's not productive. So
Hmm.
I'm starting to observe that about myself non-judgmentally, right? And the minute that I go to do that, being like, boop, pop back up, right? Like really being consistent around that because that's a behavior I know is now in my algorithm.
Yeah, you got to practice presence.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I don't have on my list, but I totally need to have on my list is I need to practice presence because my phone is a problem for me
Same.
and it's becoming a filler, right?
That's what I feel like it
It's
is.
becoming
It's
a
like, I
filler.
don't
I
wanna deal
don't,
with this moment, so I'm gonna sit and, like, it's dramatic. Like, I go and I sit down in a room of where no one is. Like, the other day, I literally felt like I ran upstairs like a child and, like, plopped on my bed, and I'm like, "What are you doing?"
right. And sometimes I'm like, what is more important than your family right now? What's more important? And if you're on your phone, you're working or you're, doing whatever, doing something more productive, I can see that. But if you're like just scrolling mindlessly, like I do, like I almost wait for something to catch my attention so I can dive into it.
Yeah.
Like that's
You're
not
like, "Oh, I'm
okay.
gonna buy a couch." Like,
Right.
now I have all these expensive couches on my feeds, and I'm like, "I can't afford a couch."
Like
Like,
what are
why
you
are you
doing,
spending
Key?
like, you did it to yourself.
You did it to yourself. And I that is something that needs to be on my list. It's almost like I know I need to change. I know it's not good for me, but I ain't ready to change.
I know.
Like, but I
But
need
you
to.
need to
I
like,
need to.
you
I
are
do.
observing it right now kinda judgmentally
Yeah.
because you took it to the point of your family, where I'm at a point where I'm taking it to myself. The best
Yourself,
way to
yeah.
get out of something is to go inward.
Yeah.
And for me, I can observe the minute that I do it, it's I'm trying to numb myself. And I can't be a good mom if I'm numbing myself.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we talked about this. I know we talked about this, but one of my other things was when I was starting to like pop into the bed, too early. I knew that that was a behavior where I was trying to avoid, I was trying to numb my anxiety. And I did that the other day. And it kind of like shocked me. I was like, oh my gosh, I have not done this in so long. What's going on with me? Like,
Yeah.
what am I not filling myself with that I
With.
need? So instead of a long period of it, it was one night.
Wow. I I feel like you did like that. You were that was like your routine
Yeah.
of getting into bed, like literally.
Like, I just wanted the day to be over because I was empty.
Yeah.
And well, not
Yeah.
empty. I don't want to say it like that. I was just depleted
Hmm.
of things that I had to give. But I also wasn't mindful of what was going on. So I wasn't filling my cup to make sure I could sustain what my family needed in the evening
And
time.
sometimes you do feel empty, especially when you're pouring into everyone's cup, you're doing everything for everyone, you're making sure like there's like a sip left for you sometimes, and you're like,
But the point is you have to be proactive around that. Like
yeah,
there is no shame in my game when I will tell Mike I'm shutting the door and you're doing bedtime like to in totality. And that's a big feat. We share bedtime routine. Um but there are some nights that I'm like, I don't have it in me. That's a planned thing, right? Instead of just sneakily kind of trying to get out of it, getting into bed early and just letting the chips fall where they may. You can plan it and have no shame around that.
100% communicating.
Yeah, that's big.
And we
That's
talked
big.
about how, like, sometimes if all you have is 40% and you're giving 100% of 40%, that's 100%.
Yeah,
That's 100% of what you have.
facts.
And realizing that, because what's taking the kids to bed and you have an attitude, or you're rushing, or you don't want to read that extra story, or you don't want to, you know, talk and like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you're better off just not doing it. And it's understanding your limits, understanding what you can give, and then communicating those things.
Yeah. You know, Going back to this moment that happened this week with the painting project, I think I was only at 40%, but something came up that I needed to dig deeper and I didn't have it.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm not going to be able to control that, right? I need to figure out how do I somehow build a reserve of at least 10% more for the days that I'm low. Like I need to have that reserve and I didn't have it. And so
Yeah.
that's a key for me taking away from this conversation is like, what does that look like leading into
How do you
that
build a
day?
reserve? Like, where is there like a secret pocket that you keep that percentage in?
That's such a great topic, how to build a reserve. I think it's going back to your word of the year around discipline.
Mm-hmm.
I
Wow.
think if I rewind over the last couple of weeks coming off the holiday, I lacked discipline in like I didn't even eat dinner. Like I was basically just eating whatever my kids didn't eat, right? Like food is huge. Fueling your body for your mental well-being is huge. And so haven't been fueling my body appropriately. I've been moving but not on my consistent, like I've not been sticking to my plan. That has thrown me off. My kids have been sick, right? So it's like there's just some adjustments that I didn't make. So therefore I did not build that reserve.
Mm. And I think that like it happens. Same thing happened to me going into New Year. Kids literally the day after New Year, everyone had the stomach bug.
Yeah.
Ran through
So
my house
everybody's around so
rapidly.
many people.
Yeah. And it was just like, oh my goodness. And of course, I'm the only one that doesn't get sick. So I'm the one that's taking care of everyone.
Yep.
And by doing that, like the things that like you set out for yourself to do, gets kind of pushed to the side, you know? Like I couldn't be like, "Hey kids, I'm working out regardless," while they're like so sick on the couch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so I had to say, okay, these things happen. This does not mean that I'm not disciplined. This does not mean that I'm not moving forward. This is not meaning that like this is going to be a reflection of the rest of the year. This means that, hey, there are going to be times where there's a wrench thrown into the schedule,
Yeah.
something that you did not expect, something that your kids and your family did not expect. There are going to be times where you have to pivot. Pivoting does not mean failure.
Right.
Pivoting just means, hey, I have to adjust to what's going on now. And if you know anything about pivoting, if you played sports, you know that the one foot never moves. It never moves. You kind of rotate around, but it doesn't move. So you're grounded,
Yeah.
right? So that thing that you're grounded on, so rather it's, discipline with work, with health, with working out, whatever it is that you set forth for yourself, just know that there are going to be times where you have to pivot, but it never knocks you off your game.
Yep.
And it's easy when you have that one foot still planted, it is easier to get back into your rotation as soon as everyone's healthy or as soon as that storm, you know, goes away.
And it's so such a great piece of advice. And what I would just add to it, and maybe to close off the episode, is reflection is really key, because you will get through every moment, right? Some prettier than others. But if you really sit and work on this mindfulness piece in the way that you mother, you could probably look back on times. I know I can look back on times when I was more of a chaotic mother, right? Where I didn't have the ability to compartmentalize something like work, and the ability to say, like, it's a fire right now, but it's not all the time. So let me compartmentalize it so I can get back to being present with my family.
Hmm.
So if I could spend some time reflecting on when I didn't have those skills and how far I've come, that is another way to really build in that mindfulness.
Because sometimes you forget. You forget
All the times you forget.
how hard it was, how, how much you've grown, how much growth has happened. And we talk about this through almost every journey, how you have to sit back and look at where you've come from and say, like, oh my gosh, I am on the right track.
Yeah. And
Sometimes
I
like
do have the skills. I
I
mean,
do
I'm
have
not
the skills.
leveraging them, but I have them in my toolbox. They're just
Yeah.
a little dusty.
Or sometimes we forget and you're like, you know what? I can overcome this. Look
Yeah.
what I've already overcome. This might seem challenging right now. This might seem like an obstacle that I will not ever come out on the other side. But like, I can. I've done this and I will.
And that's the time, I think, if like you can't get to that point yet, compartmentalize, put it in a box. Like I've done this in therapy. Like if I was so overwhelmed in work, my therapist would say, put that in a box and we're going to put it on the shelf. We're coming back to that. We're
Hmm.
not even thinking about that. And then we go immerse ourselves in real life outside of our heads, in our community, like you talk about, with other moms, other working parents of these things. And then you have a new lens. Say, okay, I'm going to take that off the shelf and now I'm going to deal with it. You're approaching it from a different lens.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes for you to step back and give some and let time come
Yeah.
and clear your head and kind of get back into the right mental state for you to go tackle that thing that seemed so big, you know? And most of the times when you go back and you open that box, you're like, oh, I got this.
Yeah, it's really not that scary.
It's really not that scary. It's not that hard. All right. But I think the smartest thing is, again, realizing what you can handle right now.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes as being a parent that we feel like, we want to be able to tackle these things because we have these little humans looking at us like we're superheroes, right? And we want to tackle these things and be, just show them that we're powerful and that we can do this. But I think the true power comes when you step away from things that
Yeah.
you don't have the strength, you don't have the mental capacity to deal with, to overcome it, to slay it. So you put it in the box and then you come back.
I love that too, and I think it's such a good point. Don't beat yourself up over these moments either, because even that moment for me, I had a tendency like throughout the day to be like, oh, are they going to remember me saying telling him to shut up forever? And it's like, don't even go there. Like they're already beyond that. You already
Yeah.
rectified it. You did your penance. Like we're moving on, baby. We're
They
moving.
would have remembered if, maybe remember more if you said that, but there was no apology. There was
Right. There
no
was no
action behind
rectifying
it.
it.
They remember that time, mommy. Remember that time, mommy, you said shut up to dad? Like I can say it now. But
Exactly.
now they won't because they said, oh, she said it, but then she corrected it.
And they hopefully will even know, like, when they come out of pocket with something, they have the ability to apologize and say,
Hmm.
I made a mistake here. And I
Yep.
can even maybe, now I'm even prepping myself or popping myself up saying, remember when mom did that?
Yep.
Remember when mom was the winner and apologized? You
Yep.
can do that too.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
See, that's my
That.
ego talking. I need to push that back down.
Yeah. Just be quiet because it's gonna be the next time that you're gonna say it. So you might as well just
Yeah. All
you
right,
might as well just hold your
everybody. We are
horses.
so happy to be with you in conversation. We hope that you're out there, feeling good too in the beginning of this year. And we will see you next week.
All right, guys. Bye.
Care